Okay, hi, hello. So last time we were still reading the text from the Matthew effect, and you had written a précis. So if you haven't done that, go back and watch the last lesson and write a précis. In a pinch, it's a really great way to see if you understand the argument by summarizing, and also it can work as sort of like a makeshift introduction paragraph if you need one. So what you're going to be doing after this is you're going to be writing a thesis statement. The reason that you might want to wait until after you've written a précis to write a thesis statement is because you want to make sure that your thesis statement has that complexity, right? So whatever your initial thought about the claim or the thesis of this argument is, you need to make sure you find that little bit of complexity. So although some might think, although it appears as though, while at first glance, something like that, think about the implicit and explicit claims. Think about if there's any other possible readings that you could use as you're finishing your analysis. Okay, so the last thing he had told us was that all of the elite hockey players are all born at the beginning of the year. And he says the explanation for this is quite simple. It has nothing to do with astrology, nor is there anything magical about the first 3 months of the year. It's simply that in Canada, the eligibility cutoff for age class hockey is January 1st. A boy who turns 10 on January 2nd then could be playing along someone who doesn't turn 10 until the end of the year. And at that age, in pre-adolescence, a 12-month age gap represents an enormous difference in physical maturity. This being Canada, the most hockey-crazed country on earth, coaches start to select players for the traveling rep squad, the all-star teams, at the age of 9 or 10. And of course, they are more likely to view as talented the bigger and more coordinated players who have had the benefit of critical extra months of maturity. Another thing to think about when you're trying to write your thesis statement is not only are you addressing claim, but you're thinking about what are the rhetorical choices that the author makes to get their argument across. Think about how this argument is structured. I would say structure is a big one for this argument. How does he start? Where does he go next? And how is he sort of wrapping up his argument here? What happens when a player gets chosen for a rep squad? He gets better coaching and his teammates are better. He plays 50 or 75 games a season instead of 20 games a season like those left behind in the house league. And he practices twice as much as, or even 3 times more than he would otherwise. In the beginning, his advantage isn't so much that he is inherently better, only that he is a little older. But by the age of 13 or 14, with the benefit of better coaching and all the extra practice under his belt, he really is better. So he's the one more likely to make it to major junior A league, and from there, the big leagues. Barnsley argues that these kind of skewed age distributions exist when 3 things happen: selection, streaming, and differentiated experience. If you make a decision about who is good and who is not good at an early age, if you separate the talented from the untalented, and if you provide the talented with a superior experience, you're going to end up with a huge advantage to that small group of people born closest to the cutoff date. All right, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit. In the United States, football and basketball don't select, stream, and differentiate quite as dramatically. As a result, a child can be a bit behind physically in these sports and still play as much as his or her more mature peers. But baseball does. The cutoff date for almost all non-school baseball leagues in the United States is July 31st. With the result that more major league players are born in August than any other month. And these numbers are striking. In 2005, among Americans playing Major League Baseball, 505 were born in August versus 313 born in July. European soccer similarly is organized like hockey and baseball, and the birth date distributions in that sport are skewed heavily as well. In England, the eligibility date is September 1st. And in the Football Association's Premier League, at one point in the 1990s, there were 288 players born between September and November, and only 136 players born between June and August. In international soccer, the cutoff date used to be August 1st, and in one recent Junior World Champion tournament, 135 players are born in the 3 months after August 1st, and just 22 were born in May, June, and July. Today, the cutoff date for international junior soccer is January 1st. Take a look at the roster of the 2007 Czech national junior team, which made the Junior World Cup finals. And of course, what can you assume about all the players that are mostly going to be born around that cutoff day? Think about why he's doing this. Why is he overwhelming us with so many examples? What is that proving? What is he trying to do there? And think about this. Remember, he says that he's using these sports as an example. He still hasn't got to where he's actually going with this argument yet. The national team tryouts, Czech soccer coaches might have as well have told everyone born after midsummer that they should pack their bags and go home. Hockey and soccer are just games, of course, involving a select few. And here's where he's getting to the extension of his argument. But these exact same biases also show up in areas of much more consequence, like education. Parents with children born at the end of the calendar year often think about holding their child back before the start of kindergarten. It's hard for a 5-year-old to keep up with a child born many months earlier. But most parents, one suspects, thinks that whatever disadvantage a younger child faces in kindergarten eventually goes away. But it doesn't. Sorry about my highlighting there. It's just like hockey. The small initial advantage that the child born in the early part of the year has over the child born at the end of the year persists. It locks children into patterns of achievement and underachievement, encouragement and discouragement that stretch on and on for years. Recently, two economists, Kelly Bedard and Elizabeth Dewey, looked at the relationship between scores on what they called the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, or TIMSS, math and science tests that are given every 4 years to children in many countries around the world, and the month of birth. So they're comparing their scores to their birth month. They found that among 4th graders, the oldest children scored somewhere between 4 and 12 percentile points better than the youngest children. That is, as Dewey explains, a huge effect. It means that if you take 2 intellectually equivalent 4th graders with birthdays on opposite ends of the cutoff date, the older student could score in the 80th percentile, while the younger could score in the 68th. And that's the difference in qualifying for a gifted program or not. It's just like sports, Dewey said. We do have ability grouping early on in childhood. We have advanced reading groups, advanced math groups. So early on, if we look at young kids in kindergarten and 1st grade, teachers are confusing maturity with ability. And they put the older kids in the advanced stream where they learn better skills. And the next year, because they're in the higher groups, they do even better. And the next year, the same thing happens and they do even better again. The only country where we don't see this going on is Denmark. They have the national policy where they have no ability grouping until the age of 10. Denmark waits to make selection decisions until maturity differences of age have evened out. Dewey and Bedard subsequently did the same analysis, only this time looking at college. What did they find? At 4-year colleges in the United States, the highest stream of post-secondary education, students belonging to the relatively youngest group in their class are underrepresented by 11.6%. That initial difference in maturity doesn't go away with time. It persists. And for thousands of students, the initial disadvantage is the difference between going to college and having a real shot at the middle class and not. I mean, it's ridiculous, Dewey says. It's outlandish that our arbitrary choice of cutoff dates is causing these long-lasting effects, and no one seems to care about them. So it's evident that it's not just sports, but it is sports. That's what's tipped him off to understanding that this is something that's actually happening. We're going to come back later and pick up these further extensions of where he's going with his argument until we get to the 10,000 hour rule. So we have a couple more pages left. And he hasn't quite gotten to why he's named it the Matthew effect yet. So what I'd like you to do is, after reading just this section, to write a thesis statement. And then when we come back, we're going to revise them. And we're going to try and tweak them a little bit and make them more particular to this argument. So remember, not only are you thinking about claim and implicit versus explicit claim, you also want to talk about rhetorical choices. One that always comes up is structure. How are they structuring their argument? Why are things in a certain order? And something you could always talk about also is tone. So if you're having a hard time trying to figure out what things to bring up, you can always talk about those things. In this argument, it's going to be a little bit easier because you've got a lot more to work on. So go back and watch the other videos, or open up the PDF document and think about what are those things that you're going to use in your thesis statement. Okay? So we will come back and finish this next time. Bye-bye.